What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, hosted by me, Brandon Davis. In today's episode, I have Dan Hurwitz sitting next to me, and he is a revenue and business transformation leader with a proven track record of scaling growth stage B2B tech companies. Dan has led 12 Series A through Series C startups through go-to-market transformations, driving 5 successful exits, including acquisitions by Salesforce, Under Armour, and InMarket. Dan excels at building high-performance sales, marketing, and customer success teams, aligning go-to-market strategies with business goals and accelerating revenue growth. Dan also consults early-stage startups through his company, First Trax Advisors, and hosts the podcast, How to Un-F Your Startup, offering insights to help founders navigate growth and challenges. Dan, thank you so much for joining today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. And with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Appreciate being here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, a little bit of background about how Dan and I got to know each other. I had some questions for my own here at Interval, and I had heard Dan on a previous podcast, and I said, Dan, I have a couple questions. You care if I pick your brain? He's a startup consultant. He advises startups all the time, and he clearly has his checks in row with all the sales and go-to-market leadership he's expressed throughout his career. So Dan, kind of to start, I want to hear about your background. How did you guys get into sales specifically, and what's been the driving force throughout your career, sticking in such a volatile yet rewarding industry?
How did I get into sales? I'm a C student from the University of Massachusetts. I was really good at throwing great keg parties and making a lot of money doing it and figuring out a way to get a 3.2 grade point average. And then I moved to New York City and got a job in sales because it's a personality thing, it's a behavior thing, and it's in my family. And it just worked for me. And I never stopped moving forward in that trajectory.
What was your first sales job that you got in New York?
In New York, I sold for a company that was doing something unique. They rented the sides of box trucks that were moving goods around major metropolitan areas like New York City, for example, or Boston or Atlanta. And we would put advertisements, these big advertisement boards on the side of the trucks. Essentially, it was selling outdoor advertising, but a unique form of outdoor advertising, because if you put a sign on the side of a truck that says Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, anybody that sees it is going to think that truck is full of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Mm-hmm. And when you've got 30 or 40 of these trucks running through a city every day, that's a lot of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups being consumed in that particular market. And all of a sudden, people start to think, wait a second here, should I be eating this candy? And it just grew business for companies. A lot of CPG companies would jump on this. And that was my first job. I went through a sales training program making peanuts and flew all over the country. It was really cool. Here I am in New York City. I'm a Boston native, so it was a big deal to be in the big city doing my thing. And that lasted for about a year. And then I got into selling advertising and print publication. Interestingly, was a business publication for beauty salon owners, helping them to run their salons. And lo and behold, freaking bald. But I sold a lot of advertising in the beauty salon publication to salon owners.
Hey, bald's the trend nowadays. I know people who specifically go bald on purpose. I have to tell my dad to that all the time because my dad's bald too, and so I have to always remind him of that.
We should all thank Michael Jordan for making it cool.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Well, Dan, yeah, I feel like a lot of times when you talk to a sales leader, they start off in some kind of random industry where they're just like dipping their toe in the water. And it is interesting. You see a lot of times sales leaders, the ones who do really, really well in sales, they weren't the A+ students. They weren't the ones who were necessarily, I don't like this phrase, but they weren't quote unquote tryhards when it came to their education or anything like that. But they're very personable. And I hope that's something people can get from this episode today is a lot of sales comes down to personality and how you can drive a conversation to make somebody feel comfortable. And Dan, that's something I've noticed for the 3 or 4 times that we've chatted over the phone or Google Meet or prepping for this podcast. That's something I've noticed about you is the personality really drives a conversation and you're able to connect with somebody very quickly. What kind of importance does that have for sales, and how have you seen that lead to success in your career?
Sure. Good question. I'm going to give you a few kind of cliches and then speak from the heart. Number one, people like to do business with people they like. So it's good to be likable. And I tell my children this, you're going to succeed well in life if you make others feel good about themselves when they're with you. And it needs to be genuine. If it comes across as BS, it's just not working. But my older daughter, for example, is really good at just making people feel wonderful. She'll comment on their shoes or their new hairstyle or, hey, is that a new coat? And she says it with such meaning, and she feels good. People feel good. They love her. She's got a gazillion friends. So that's number one. Number two, sales is a contact sport. Cliche, right? It is a contact sport. I know that with the advent of and the ubiquity nature of technology, it becomes easier to do things virtually, hence this podcast. However, it really is a podcast, and it really is a contact sport. I find, this is actually interesting, when I go to a meeting physically and I'm done with the meeting in the big conference room with all the key people, and whoever leaned in the most, or whoever I wanted to lean in the most in that meeting, hopefully is the person that walks to the elevator bank with me. The conversation from the conference room to the elevator vestibule, the bank there, that stays while the elevators are opening and closing, and you're still there talking to that person, champion, the buyer, the economic decision maker, et cetera. That's the whole meeting. Those are the best parts of the meeting. That's where you get all the juice, all the detail. You get your real candid questions, or you get candid answers to your questions. In the conference room, sitting around the table, oftentimes there's a lot of people. Nobody wants to speak up. Nobody wants to say anything and embarrass themselves or undermine the boss or anything like that. So everybody's quiet. But when you walk one-on-one, and that's where you connect. So personality helps you do that. How you treat people, how you make them feel, being there physically, being in contact is extremely important. And have a positive attitude. Be fun. Be interesting. That's just how I've played it. And it's worked, I guess. I don't know.
I just had an experience. This is probably about 3 weeks ago, so it's fresh in mind. I show up, and normally how a sales process goes for interval is we sit down, we do some outbound prospecting, or maybe if they come inbound, it's usually you're talking to one, maybe max of two people. I remember this calendar invite popped up on my calendar. Somebody had scheduled an appointment through our website, and I see them. We allow the option of people adding guests onto our Google meetings, and in that I go, what on earth is happening? Because one guest is added, two guests are added, 3 or 4 or 5, way more out of the norm than we were used to. And so I'm like, all right, you always got to prepare for your sales meetings. But in this case, I was like, I really got to prepare for this one. There's going to be a lot of people here. So I hop on. And to your point, Dan, when it's not this in-person connection that we can kind of feel the room, feel the audience and whatnot, it's really challenging on Google Meet or Zoom or whatever platform you're using to sometimes kind of gauge the motions of where the team is at in this point in time. So I start off, and I'm kind of if you haven't got this vibe, and if you haven't been a long-term listener here of the Get Over Yourself podcast, I'm kind of a bubbly person. I enjoy talking with people and getting to know their stories and whatnot. That's usually how I start all my sales conversations. And immediately I read the room and said, okay, this group is not one of these people who want to mess around. We want to get straight to the point. And so there was kind of a kickback I had to do where I said, all right, I'm going to take off my normal sales hat this is how I make my personality. I let it kind of drive the conversation. I'm going to sit back for a second. I'm going to get straight to the point and get in the core of it. And then once I uncover what issues and desires they're wanting through the company, then I could start cracking, for lack of a better term, start cracking some of these jokes and open them up a little bit. And so what advice would you say, Dan, for anyone who doesn't necessarily have as many opportunities to do the in-person visits anymore in this digital age that we're living in? People want to hide behind their screens. Half the time people's cameras are turned off. How can you kind of pick and prod into somebody and still have those personal relationships, even if you're not in person?
Good question. Let me think about that. For me, all I can share is what I do and what I see works and what doesn't. And it's a component of my personality. So I behave consistent with my personality. So I'll share what my recipe is. And that might be different from yours or someone else's. Number one, I'm super candid. I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm straight. I drop F-bombs constantly. You were polite when you shared the name of how to NF your startup. That's what I do for a living, is I help companies un-F their startups. And you set the tone, so I'm going to keep it clean. But yeah, I think candor is great. Also, I find that, especially in corporate America, I had this conversation with my son yesterday, and I'll share what he said to me. He produces podcasts, and he said, I'm a baseball cap and tank top, t-shirt wearing type of guy. And I show up like that in my life because that's who I am. He said, I talk to these corporate people all the time, and they're all buttoned up and they're all fancy and they use big words to impress, and they follow, very specific, instructions and protocol, and they kiss up to the boss and all that. And he's like, I don't do that. I don't either. And maybe he's a chip off my block here, the old block, as they say. He's my kid, but I just keep it real. People like to be real. And the funny thing is when you start to get to know your customers or even your prospects during the sales process, if you get an opportunity, and I'm going to bring it back to the first question, to get physically with them, go to dinner, share a bottle of wine, hang out, talk, all of a sudden that facade comes off and they're real people. The people that they are, the people they are on the weekends. Those are the people that I want to come out when I'm having a sales, or for that matter, any conversation, and just be you. And that's fine. And it doesn't have to be you in a suit and tie unless that's who you are all the time. Some people are formal. I'm not. I wear a black shitty t-shirt that I don't even know if it came out of the clean laundry or the dirty laundry. No, it's clean. But that's just, be yourself. People appreciate that. It's more genuine. That's what's worked for me.
That's perfect.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And yeah, I think my biggest takeaway on that, and what I can replicate as well, is yes, be your authentic self. There's plenty of people who I know try and mold their sales career on what they see the top performers in the company doing. And it never replicates exactly how they want. Sure, the tonality and things like that, yes, you can try and match that as best you can. But if I try and sell like Dan, I'm not selling well. If Dan tries to sell like me, he's not selling well. Even though we kind of do have some similar approaches when it comes to sales. But I think you get my point. Yeah. So diving forward a little bit, Dan, you have led some go-to-market strategies for some very, very large companies, and you also advise startups in their go-to-market approach. In your perspective, what does in today's AI age, what does a solid go-to-market plan look like?
I think it needs to get to the basics. We tend to overcomplicate. So I'm going to start off with saying, don't overcomplicate it. A solid go-to-market plan is as easy as going to ChatGPT and saying, I need a go-to-market plan, and writing a really good prompt. And it'll come back and it'll tell you, this is what you should do. And it's pretty straightforward. So it starts with people. Okay. Arguably, depending on what you sell, your company's single biggest asset is its people. And I don't like to refer to people as an asset like they're an item, but it's probably the largest line item on the OpEx. People. Invest in getting the best people to do the jobs. Another very important go-to-market entity is to make sure that you have a very clear understanding of what you solve. So tell you a short story. I'll try to keep it super short. I went to one of those New York City rooftop networking events not quite a year ago. It was a blast, and I do a ton of them. But this one in particular, when you came in, you either picked a yellow badge, a red badge, or a blue badge. And your color represented whether you were a founder, an investor, or other. And so I put an investor tag on because they do invest in early stage startups, like seed stage startups sometimes. And that's where my business is for my advisory. It's helping early stage. And I might as well have been just meat on a hook. They were all over me. And these are technical founders. Mm-hmm. Often 9 out of 10 of them were engineers that built something that they're really proud of. And that's great. They should be proud of it. And they would come up to me, obviously looking for money. They see my tag and they just start right into, let me tell you what I built. Let me tell you what I built. And every one of them, I would say, enough, stop. I don't want to hear what you built. Tell me what you solve and why does it matter? And they're like, what do you mean? I want to know what problem you solve, for who, and why it's critical. And if you have any kind of ROI metrics on, the value of what you solve.
If it actually works, whatever they build.
Share that too. And they would struggle and I would get it out of them. And this happened over and over again during that night. And they'd like scratch their head and be like, And I said, come on, you got this. And they eventually would communicate it. And I said, that's how you lead. You want to talk to an investor, you lead with your problem. So it's very important that you understand your problem. Now, your problem ties into your ICP, ideal customer profile. Be very specific around who you solve, whatever it is you solve for, what their infographics. So it's, the verticals that you're in, the sizes of the companies that you want to attract, what's unique about these companies, whatever signals you can find, you need to add them into that mix, so to speak, and really get that dialed down. A conversation, Brandon, that you and I had early on was about the idea of boiling the ocean. Don't try to boil the ocean. If you were to go hire somebody to do work in your house, let's say you need a kitchen done, and you talk to just a general contracting person, and you said, can you do my kitchen? And they said, yeah, sure. Okay, great. You get a proposal, the whole bit. Next contractor comes in and says, I specialize in kitchens for houses in this area. I know all the local contractors that sell stuff that you need to redo a kitchen and support that. I've been doing kitchens for 25 years. Here's a picture of all the kitchens that I've done. All of a sudden you're like, that guy's focused. That's the guy that I need. It's really good to be an expert because people want trust and credibility. And so start there. And the advice that I gave you early on was start very specifically in that area, being an expert in that thing. And then once you nail that thing, you can go to an adjacent thing, vertical, and say, your industry is very similar to this industry over here. We've been experts over there, and now we're taking the knowledge and we're applying it to your industry. And now you get 2 industries, and then you have 3 industries, and then you have 4 industries. And before you know it, you kind of boiled a portion of the ocean for yourself, but you did it one at a time. So that's important in a go-to-market strategy. The next thing I do, and this is just my personal recipe, is I hire very senior talent. And I pay them. You got to pay them a lot because their opportunity is to go next door and get paid what they're worth. So pay them what they're worth. And if you can't afford it, then just continue to sell as a founder-led sales, as they call it. The reason you want senior level people is because when you're at this stage, and I'm talking startup, we can talk enterprise in addition. I have less experience there. However, I still understand it. Senior level people have the ability to be strategic, go out into the marketplace, try different approaches, different ways of communicating the value proposition, and come back with intelligent feedback to, as I call it, the mothership. Come back to the mothership and say, okay, I tried these 4 things. These are the 2 that resonated. These didn't. I'm going to hone in our messaging this way. I think that we should start thinking about this other market or companies that are bigger or smaller or whatever it may be, and really get you honed in. They're your starter crew. They're helping you figure it out. And then from there, once you've got it nailed and you've got your playbook, old school term, guidebook, guideline book, whatever you want to call it, you've got that figured out and codified, it's a book. It could be, virtual, but sitting on Google Drive, but it's a book. Change it every day as you build it. Your playbook is the Bible that you then go hire your next 10 or 20 salespeople. Those people don't have to be as senior because the figuring out the recipe for success has already been done by the senior people, built the playbook, and now give it to the junior people. You pay them less money and you just say, follow the playbook, follow the playbook. The good ones will kind of come out of the pack and help you by offering some additional suggestions or advice. And you should encourage everybody to do that. But you'll quickly see these are the less senior, I don't want to call them junior, but less senior reps who really got game. They're your future for tomorrow. Those are the ones you really want to hold on to. So back to your people. So it's your people, it's your ICP, it's your messaging, it's what you solve. Make sure you get that dialed down and then put together a really good marketing plan. A plan that's going to help you be excellent at content, thought leadership, where because you're now an expert in this particular vertical, go out and crow to the rooftops of that vertical. Go crow from the rooftops to that vertical, telling all the people that are in that industry what you know about their industry and your point of view and your thought leadership, and share that as content. This is that for me. This podcast is my opportunity to crow from the rooftops to startups. And they're going to say, wait, maybe this guy, Dan Hurwitz, knows a thing or two, and maybe I'll get a couple of phone calls. Who knows, whatever. This is more about having a good conversation with you, not a lead gen effort. But
still, if that's a byproduct, though, that's a
but it is,
thing.
it's good. And so your content, your thought leadership is a big part of your marketing strategy. Social selling. Put together a good strategy around social selling. Where are the people who are buying, who are ideal buyers of your product or service? Where are they hanging out across social media? Typically LinkedIn, but it could be other places too. Mm-hmm. Find those conversations. There's groups. There's tons of groups on LinkedIn. Find them, get in them, and be part of it. And be vocal and speak. Don't sell your product, sell yourself as an expert. Once you've done that, they're going to look you up and they're going to find out, who is this guy, Brandon Davis? Really smart guy. He really knows the space well. Wow. That's a guy that I think I might want to talk to and engage with. I really like his point of view and his opinion. He's got some great data and research and all that. You got a customer. Mm-hmm. You got the fish jumping in the boat. So couple of areas of marketing. Marketing is also SEO and SEM, which is now AI driven heavily. You got to solve for Perplexity, you got to solve for ChatGPT, et cetera, not just Google. And then perhaps if you have the budget, an event calendar where you want to be at these events. Back to sales as a contact sport. Somebody's pouring coffee for themselves at a conference and you walk over, you see their name tag, and all of a sudden you like coffee too. So you drink coffee with that person, you get to know them, you have a conversation, you be candid and personable. You ask them about themselves, you comment on their shoes without being cheesy, but whatever, you get the idea. And then last is, and it's certainly not last, but last for the purposes of this conversation, these are the big ones, the customer journey. And it doesn't end when you sign the deal. You want to make those customers absolutely love you, and you want to dazzle them so that they stay with you for as long as possible, and you want to keep your churn as low as you can. And the way to do that is to make sure you hire a really solid account manager lead, call them customer success, customer support, account management, call them what you want. These are post-sale leaders who are going to make sure that customer proactively is kit glove handled like really well, to make sure that before that customer has a question, you already solved it for them. And that's really important. So what you have is you've got a solid message to the right customer or prospect, supported by great marketing, delivered by great salespeople, and then followed up by an excellent team or at least person to get started that can make sure that the customer journey is a really good one. And then put together some kind of a plan where your customers refer you new business, because that's important. Your best prospects are your existing customers, for sure, always. And they're a lot cheaper to go find. So a lot there. Sorry it took me a long time to communicate it, but I hope that was helpful and answered your question.
That is beautiful. I mean, that is the exact roadmap. If anyone is struggling with their go-to-market right now, that is the exact play right there. You go back, you rewind to the past 7.5 minutes or however long that was, and you write all those down and you go and solve it. And what's interesting, Dan, is what stood out to me is I specifically threw in at the end of my question there, in the age of AI. And I feel like not much has changed. And I'd be curious your opinion on that. Not much has changed. It doesn't matter what quote unquote age that we're living in. The basic principles of a go-to-market plan still stay intact. And a lot of that resolves around people. Make sure that they understand what their worth is. Make sure you pay them their worth, and make sure you can have your team stay by your side. So it is interesting when I preface that question, in the age of AI, that in my head, you didn't make any changes to what you would have done 10 years ago either.
So what I gave you is strategies, but the tactics are now very much AI. So
dive into that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just back up. I want to be relevant as I continue my career, and I don't want to age out. And so I made a commitment that I was going to get involved in AI startups, and I did. And I'm chief revenue officer of an AI company. And it helps me stay in the fast lane and be super relevant. So that's my day job. And then on the side, I have my First Trax Advisory business where I help seed stage customers. But the fact that I now really understand the inner workings of AI in the ecosystem and know how to use it, it's very important that you think through how you can use it within your organization to do a lot more productivity for with a lot less resources. So I'm going to give you an example. In the go-to-market space, there's always a lot of question as to whether or not BDRs are necessary. Should I have a BDR team? And my personal philosophy is they're necessary if done right, but it's very hard to do it right, and most don't. I don't want a phone call from a number that I don't know. In fact, I've already had 2 since you and I have been on this call. I put my phone on silent. I don't recognize the number, and every now and then I'll pick up the phone, and it's a BDR. Got my number from Apollo or wherever else, Zoom Info, and it's like, all right, I know my number's out there, and now I have to sit through a phone call that I don't want, and they're usually super cheesy. But considering I'm a chief revenue officer and I'm passionate about how do you make it work, I try to be polite, but I'm pissed because you're bothering me. And so I think that today's BDR is one that can be done, that role can be done heavily with AI. You can't make a phone call, but I don't believe in phone calls unless you earn the right to be able to call that person on their personal number. Because I look at it and I'm like, where'd you get my personal number? Why are you calling me on Friday at 7 p.m.? You may be in a different time zone, but it's frickin' Friday at 7 p.m. for me. Leave me alone. I shouldn't have taken it in the first place. Like I said, once in a while I will. So I actually coached a young person recently in their career who I mentored at one of the incubators that I participate in. And kid calls me up. He says, I got my first job and I'm really excited. I'm talking to this company to become their BDR. What do you think? He got the job offer and he was asking me, what do you think? Because I mentored him. And I said, truthfully, 6 months you're going to be out of a job. He's like, what do you mean, Dan? I said, so what are you going to do? Send out a bunch of emails? I can have an AI tool do that. I said, what are you going to do? The whole LinkedIn social selling thing? All right, that makes sense, but I can have an AI do most of that. It's got to be behind a person, but AI can do it. I said, you want to make a career for yourself? Go become the machine operator at the BDR. And then I told him a story about way back when I was watching that TV show on Sunday night, 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
And on 60 Minutes, they did an episode. This is a long time ago. They did an episode on robotics and how robotics were taking factory workers' jobs. And they showed the assembly line of an automotive plant, and they showed the before and after. And the before were an army of people putting, I don't know, mirrors on the sides of pickup trucks. And as the pickup trucks came across the line, they'd put their mirror on, and then the next one would come and they'd put their mirror on. And then all of a sudden, those people lost their jobs, and you'd see a robot doing it. And the assembly line would go 3 times as fast, and the robots were doing precision work and putting mirrors on pickup trucks. Those people that were smart figured out, how do I operate the robot? That's what I want to do, and that'll keep me with a job. The people that didn't, that dug their heels in the ground, were the ones that got laid off, and then they went to look for another factory job that was potentially hiring. And now everybody wants their jobs back. The reality is, that ship has sailed. So I'm not going to get political, but you get where that could potentially go, right? Well, that ship has sailed. So AI is doing white-collar jobs now, BDRs in particular, that were in the past done by humans, and now you can write a great email with BDR. And I am using some of those tools right now. I built a whole AI BDR stack with an expert who's my machine operator, one full-time hire. And he's doing the work of 10 BDRs. He's awesome. And so I've gone that approach. Marketing. Don't need copywriters anymore. Pretty simple. You can do a lot of sales enablement with a lot less people. So AI has a big place in the world of marketing. So to answer your original question, I tried to give some stories and make it interesting as I could and keeping it real. Brandon, AI, wherever you can within the go-to-market strategy to reduce costs, headcount costs, and other costs, and increase productivity. And if you're not doing that, you got to think about the fact that your competitor is, and it's going to kick your ass. So
that's for, I would go a step further too, Dan, and say that's for any industry. It doesn't matter if you're a startup. It doesn't matter if your company's been in business for 250 years now.
Yep. I completely agree.
It does.
Yep.
I was recently talking to one of our investors here, Interval, and I was asking him what the landscape has been over the past couple of years, because there was a massive shift in the investment world during COVID. Pre-COVID, it was a very set way. Post-COVID, it was very different. And now, as we've entered in the past couple of years into, we'll stick with my theme here, the age of AI, the entire investment atmosphere is completely different. They don't look at the world. I'll have to have him on the podcast here soon so we can dive into this in more detail, but they don't view the world as black and white as they used to. In a traditional pre-seed business stage, in the past, it was very easy where you'd walk up to an investor. Like you said, you had all those people showing up to that party with you and with their ideas. You say, I have this concept. Not really any proof yet. It's just a thought in my head. Give me a little bit of change to go and work on it for the next little bit. And then in the seed round, you kind of dialed in those operations, maybe a few paying customers. And now you're like, all right, now that we've proved that we can sell this to a couple people, now we'll put some fire on, some gas on the fire and grow it. That landscape is changing. It's because now in the age of AI, we can use tools that are going to operate a lot cheaper for us, that work just as efficient as any other processes if you implement them correctly. And so your expenses are a lot lower, but then more importantly, your outreach should be a lot higher as well, where you are able to go and get traction from the very early days. You don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on prototyping and hiring out engineers to go in and build the product. Now you get a very simple proof of concept. You put it in the hands of your customer. You could do it as quick as an afternoon, depending on how complex your product is.
See it happen all the time.
It's insane what we do. Now here at Interval, one massive thing that we do before we build any product out in full fledged, what we do is we prototype it with a tool like Replit or Bolt or something. Yeah, not even close to the final version, but a very, very simple version of the product, and say, go put it in the hands of our customer, a potential new customer, and say, hey, Mr. Customer, this is what we're working on for the next stage of X, Y, or Z. Click around, tell us your thoughts. What do you hate? What do you dislike? What do you love? And obviously a lot of times the UI or the UX is horrible, or there's little features that need to be added, but it gives us that very early proof of concept. You do it for very cheap and you can grow it and scale it very quickly.
You know, it's funny you talk about that. I refer to that as validation.
Yep.
So if you're an early stager and you're just getting going with your concept, it used to be that you spent millions to develop some kind of maybe a SaaS product or whatever software, and you had to spend $1 million or whatever, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get
whatever
it up
the
right
price
now.
tag might be,
yeah, you can do it. So, and then you need to go out to the marketplace and validate it. And I remember early on, an investor gave me advice. He said, go take your idea and test it and run it by 500 people. And then get back to me once you've gotten that information. I'm like, how am I going to do that? It's going to take me a year to do that. Now you can do that super fast, super cheap, and get those 500 people to give you advice. And that means a lot because the market speaks and you got to listen to the market. And it's funny because the second question that I would ask these people in that rooftop networking event where I was a piece of meat hanging from a hook with a red tag on, it's funny because the second question I would ask them is, so you got this great idea. Now I understand what it solves and why. Have you validated it? And they're like, what do you mean? How many people have told you, how many prospects have told you that if you build this, they will buy it? And they're like, I don't know, 4.
So like, Dan, what you're telling me is it's not the field of dreams in every business scenario and people are going to flock to you? Who would have thought?
But they think it is. They're so proud of it. And you know what? It's myopic to think that way. Go out and put the concept, the idea in front of 100, 200 people that are ideal customer profile that you think you have, and go out there and test it and see what they say. And guess what? You do that. And this is part of my little recipe back to the earlier question of my go-to-market plan. When you do your validation, if you ask enough people, hey, I'm thinking about building this to solve this problem for people like you. If I buy this and it delivers X, Y, Z, if I develop this, will you buy this? I'm going to make it. Will you buy it? Yeah, I'll buy that. Or no, I wouldn't buy it. Or they might ask, well, how much? And you could say, I don't know. You tell me. What would you pay for this? If this saves you $3 million over the course of a year, would you pay $200,000 for it? Yeah, of course they would. All right, great. Can I put you on my list to call you as soon as it's ready? And I'll tell you what, I'll give you a ripping deal on it when we first come out. It might be beta or whatever. Would you be willing to that? And they go, yeah, you just built a pipeline.
Yep. Dan, I might take that even a step farther. And this doesn't work in any case. I'm not going to claim it works every single time. Even in the very, very early days of Interval, we make people pay for a meeting with us. And so we would tell them from the get-go, this is a very, very early MVP. It's not ready to go live. We're just going out and testing the validation. Will you pay us to even have us demo the product for you? And in the early days, that's how we got real validation for us too. We'd make people pay to sit through a meeting that we were conducting for them and pay for our product.
Never heard of that. I love that. You know what? That's marketing. That's perception. It's kind of interesting. It's similar to, I remember this way back when I was in college in marketing. We talked about the case study where this clothing store owner, small boutique type shop,
Mm-hmm.
goes and gets 100 pairs of these jeans and puts them on the rack and says, they're $25. Nobody buys them.
Yep.
And then the same store owner takes the jeans and says, these are $150 jeans on sale now for $120, $110. Off the
Instant
shelf they
sale.
go.
Yep.
God.
Yep.
Same type of thing.
It is.
You
And like I said,
created the urgency, the demand, and the quality. It's all perception.
It is.
And then you blew them out the door. That's awesome. I love that story, Brandon.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not like you're going to be able to get every single person. You still want to have those early validations. You should never sacrifice meetings with somebody if they're not willing to put the dollar in your hand immediately. But in my opinion, in my humble opinion here, if somebody verbally saying, maybe sure a letter of intent or something like that is going to help. But if somebody just verbally says, oh yes, I'll be your customer, it means nothing until you actually have a dollar in your hand, in my opinion.
True, but it means more when you have a dollar in your hand, for sure, because people just want to tell you what you want to hear. However, you can call those people back and say, remember the conversation? Yeah, I remember. Well, I now have it. It's better than going cold.
It is.
That's for sure.
That's definitely true.
But I like your idea. That's interesting. I need to chew on that a little bit. We should have a follow-up conversation on that.
Yeah.
Maybe write a case study and do a little.
It was very impactful for us because in the early stage, background on Interval for anyone who's a new listener here on the podcast, Interval came out of an incubator program of Brigham Young University called Sandbox. Basically, replaced the normal traditional education of tests and college professors and whatnot, where you get your college credit to go work on a tech startup. My co-founder and I, we went through 14 something odd ideas. Every single one of them had a semblance of a company. Nothing really stuck. And so our biggest key indicator to what was going to work versus what wasn't, hence where Interval is today, is getting people to pay up front. And that was the biggest indicator on what success was going to be driven from the business versus needing to pivot and move on to the next one. So Dan, one final question I really have for you before we close out today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. A lot of the core competency behind what you said today was focused around people. Even in the age of AI, people still matter. And people's a really tough industry in sales. You get recruited left and right if you're good at your job to go and work for somebody else. Our very, very small team, the few reps that we have, within the first couple months of working here, they have been recruited out or tried to been recruited out. We poach our sales reps from other companies. It is a nitty gritty industry when it comes to actually retaining your people. How do you build a culture where people actually want to stay and stick inside that atmosphere and want to actually continue growing inside of your company when somebody is waving a flashy check in front of them, or there's the next latest product that they can go jump on board with?
I'm going right to what I refer to as building a culture that begins with the get to know you meeting. So not to plug myself, but if you go to my LinkedIn, on one of my featured...
Which will be in the episode description, by the way, for anyone out there listening to that.
One of my featured posts is an overview of what I call the get to know you meeting. And what it is in the first literally day, definitely within the first week of you hiring somebody new or inheriting somebody new, like if you come into a new job and you inherit a team, and you sit down with each of your direct reports and you do the get to know you meeting. And it's all outlined exactly how to do it in that post. However, I'll give you a quick overview. It's nothing more than a candid 1 hour conversation where you, for example, let's say you and I are doing it. We sit down and I ask you a series of questions that begins with, Brandon, what do you want to do when you grow up? Tell me about your career aspirations and the time frame around that. So we talk about that. Why do you want to do that, Brandon? Why do you want to be a startup founder? Why do you want to be a podcast host? And where do you want to go next? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to sell your company and start another one? Like, why? Next question. What do you think your strengths are? When you answer that, what do you think your developmental areas are? Because we don't like to say weaknesses, right? Because, what do you develop? What frustrates you? What motivates you? What just bums you out? What is just not okay and not cool? And what you've done is you've learned who these people are and what they care about at that point, it's about 30 to 40 minutes in. And then I go and I answer the same questions and I give them my answers. So we've just established a relationship fast tracked as to who are you? What do you care about? What are your career aspirations? What do you want to be when you grow up? Obviously, what are your strengths, weaknesses? Where do you want to develop yourself? What frustrates you? I know everything about you. Now I can lead you in a way that works for you. And guess what? The next person who I do that with is going to have completely different answers. And what is interesting over the years of doing hundreds and hundreds of these, you hear things like, I want to be a fireman. Well, you're selling software. Well, I'm not ready to be a fireman, but eventually I want to be a fireman. You know what my attitude is? I'm going to help you be the best darn fireman you can be. But for right now, we're selling software. So let's help you along your journey to become a fireman through this stage of being a software salesperson. Oh, and by the way, I know what your developmental areas are. You told me that you want to improve your verbal communications and your writing skills. Great. I'm going to help you with that. So I give and give and give to these people so that they can develop their career. And it becomes hard to take on a phone call when you think to yourself, I really don't want to leave Dan and my company. And it's not just about money. Although people will tell you money is something that especially salespeople, money is something that I care deeply about. My answer is why? And they're like, I don't know. But here's what's interesting. People never have done this before with their boss. They're like, thank you so much for taking the time to get to know me as an individual and not just put me as salesperson number 27, cookie cutter me. Thank you. I appreciate that. And they want to stay for that reason. Now, based on that, you can build a culture around leadership and personal development, making sure that people are happy and that you're helping them get to where they want to go. Every quarter, I read those documents because those documents are now written. I write down everything. Nobody sees them except me and that person. That's it. They don't go to HR. And HR have said to me, hey, can you send me a couple of those? No way. No way. I'm like, why not? Send me those. I want to see those. No way. Or I'll send them a copy of one, but I'll anonymize it so they don't, so at least they get to understand the concept. And it's worked really well. That's the beginning of how I start building a culture. Would you rather have an extra X amount of dollars in your paycheck and be miserable, or take a little bit less pay and really love getting up in the morning, having great Sunday nights where you don't have the Sundays hating the fact that you got to go to work in the morning? Nobody wants that. So I work on that. The other thing I do, and then I'll get us done so that we can move on with our day, is I try to be as candid as I can. And I ask the question of everybody that works for me, and I ask it monthly. What is the conversation like between you and whoever it is that you're with on a Friday evening at 6:30, 7 o'clock, who you might be enjoying a glass of wine or a cigar or, a ride in the car, and you're talking to, often bitching and moaning about the shit that went on this week? What are those conversations like? Because that's where the real stuff comes out in those conversations. For me, it's my wife. It's often my older son. And it is a place for me to just vent about what I dislike, but it's also an opportunity to me to share about all the great things that happened this week. And I want to know, as a leader, Brendan, what are your conversations like with whomever that person is for you on a Friday evening or a Tuesday evening or whatever, over a glass of wine or I don't know. And what are those conversations like? Because that's the real deal. And if I can get to that just truthful, candid place with my direct reports, there's no amount of money that you can pay somebody that can replace that. They appreciate it. And I'll tell you what, when and if I ever, when I am in a position where I have to go build a team somewhere, I can build a team in 10 minutes of really top candidates who want to come and be in that kind of a culture and world. So that's what I believe is a good approach to making sure that when the recruiter calls come in, they're just like, yeah, you know what? I'm good. I want to hang out here and stay here. And it's not just about the money, but also pay them well. If you don't pay them well, you got to pay them well.
You still got to hate them up. Yep.
You got to pay them well. But if you hire the best and you give them an opportunity to make a lot of money, again, this is sales and marketing, customer success. Everybody should get a piece of the pie, a hefty, nice piece of the pie. Because it goes back to your people are your single biggest asset. So take good care of them. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Lots of good advice. Lots of advice that I'm going to go back after this episode is produced and go back and listen while I'm on my drive home. That's my place where I go and listen to podcasts. If I'm in the car, I'm not a music person. I'm either listening to podcasts or I'm keeping up with the relationships, calling people in my life.
I
Anyone
like
who's listening to
I like
this,
the
there you
short
go.
video snippets. The short video
Yeah,
snippets,
yeah.
those are great.
A lot of fire information you can get very, very quickly and let it light you up for the day.
Yep.
But Dan, final question I have for you here on the Get Over Yourself podcast. The whole reason why the Get Over Yourself podcast has existed for coming up on 4 years now is the concept that people on the Instagram version of themselves, on the picturesque version, they quote unquote make it in life. They have the money, they have the cars, they have the beautiful family, but they still lack a lot of meaning inside of their life. And I noticed that from a very young age. And I recognize that I know at one point in time, interval is going to continue to grow and life is going to be quote unquote cherry. But I never wanted to be the person who wasn't able to give back to their community based upon the successes that they gave to me originally. So the Get Over Yourself podcast at its core is trying to find the concept of how can we use the time, talents, and everything that we've acquired inside of our life and give it back to others. So what does the concept of Get Over Yourself mean to you, Dan? And how do you think you can better apply it inside of your life?
I appreciate that. That's really what makes you, and what makes each of us ourselves. It's the best version of you, as they say. I'll tell you what I do. I think about in practice. I think about at my funeral, who's going to show up and what are they going to say? And we've all heard that, right? Your own eulogy, right? But I want to know that here's what I want. I want, from a business standpoint, people who have worked for me in the past to say, I remember back in 2025, I worked for this guy, Dan Hurwitz. He was the best darn boss leader I ever had. He did this get to know you thing with me on day one. He constantly asked me how I'm doing, how I'm developing, what can we do to improve. He pushed me, he challenged me, he was straightforward, he was candid. He was that guy. Oh, and by the way, my fourth grade teacher, Miss Laskowski, literally my fourth grade teacher, she left an impact on my life. She was great. She made us spell her name. We were in fourth grade. And I want to be somebody who people look back on and say, that's somebody who made an impact in my life. So I care deeply about that. And then in addition, my First Trax Advisory business is not about the money. My day job is about the money as being a CRO. But my First Trax Advisory business is mostly for seed stage companies who don't have the money. And so I like to pay it forward and help them create strong businesses and avoid the problems that many later stage companies encounter and then need to call me to come in and help them, fix those things. But what if I could get to these companies earlier before they make those mistakes? And so it means a lot to me to give back, to pay it forward. I feel like when you do for others, and I tell all four of my kids, give more than you take. It feels the reward for giving is so much better than the reward for taking. And maybe you don't realize that when you're 15 years old and you want an Xbox, but I'll tell you what, when you're older, when you're my age, that's what really matters. And so I live my life based on the fact that I want to make sure that other people will always look at me and say, that's a guy that really helped me out a lot and gave me a lot of my life, and I'm going to remember him forever. That's what I want my legacy to be. So that's how I approach it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. Everyone, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. If you found anything impactful, please make sure to leave a 5-star review. That's how we can continue to grow this show. You guys are my best form of marketing, and I appreciate every single one of you. As always, feel free to message me on social media or send me an email. All of that will be in the episode description below. Same with Dan here. If you guys want to reach out to Dan, all of his social medias will be linked in the episode description below. If you run a startup and you're interested in his advisory business, that'll also be linked down in the episode description. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on next week's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast.